Hey now, how is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries with Tanya E. Hood. I am Tanya E. Hood, a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, it simply means I've worn a lot of different hats in my life that have helped me develop a full range of strategies and actionable steps that I've used to help my clients make a strategic impact, both personally and professionally, to have better than what life has been given them. Red Alert Diaries is based on the life lessons from my premier book, Red Alert. Is He the One? The pocket guide to finding the love of your life. And if you read my book, you already know that I got married at 21. And after 11 years of marriage, I found myself going through a divorce, having to raise my two sons alone. To reset my life and survive my divorce, I took the time I needed to get to know me better, which opened me up to a new love again. So now I'm in a new marriage to the love of my life and my best friend, which just proves there is life after divorce. On this podcast, we have conversations that's real talk, marriage, divorce, money, and legacy. I want you to join me on the journey. Call 240-532-2227. That's 240-532-2227. I want this podcast to challenge your thoughts and inspire you to grow. So together, we can operate in excellence. Today, we have a special guest joining us, Miss Syreeta Nolan. So everyone, I have got to introduce this amazing woman to you. Syreeta is also one of the co-authors to our latest #1 Amazon bestseller in 8 categories and internationally. Our book is titled Your Voice Matters. This book was a collaboration of love, expression of healing, and to let the voices of those that have been marginalized be heard. In the United States, the death of George Floyd uncovered the trauma that many Black people in America have been experiencing for years. And I am so grateful that people like Syreeta came together to let it be known that this was not just an isolated incident. Syreeta was born in Long Beach, California, and raised in the Tampa Bay area of Florida by a single mother. She serves as the CEO of Disabled in Higher Education on Twitter and is a board member of Health Advocate X, as well as the founder of JADE, Justice, Advocacy, and Disability Education. As a holistic disabled justice platform focused on empowering disabled students, faculty, staff, and alumni through community and support. She's earned her bachelor's with honors in human health psychology from the University of California, San Diego. Syreeta, thank you so much for being here and knowing your heart to serve. Can you give us just a snippet of what you shared inside of Your Voice Matters so that those that get it can get an idea of your perspective?
So part of me is just a poet and an artist at heart. So I decided to choose to share a poem called Call, because we're called to the fullness of who we are. And it's a process in any form of our identity. Our identities as a Black woman, as a Black Indigenous woman, our identities, like for me, I identify as a Black Indigenous, bisexual, disabled woman. I live in that fullness. And that poem just kind of takes you through a little clip of my journey. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you read all of the entries in this phenomenal book that I'm honored to be a part of.
There was a great mixture, and thank you for supplying a poem, because a lot of people had individual stories, but you and as well as several others have given an expression. So thank you so much for that. Let me ask you this. What's exciting you about this book? Why you really want people to make certain that they get it?
I love stories. Like even from the time I was a kid, like I had an apartment that had a chain link fence next to a senior home, and I jumped that fence like every day to hang out with the senior citizens. But I feel like in this time in history, it's more critical to hear the stories of Black people from our perspectives, from our heart, not just from the news talking about who is past and what names we should remember, but from our hearts. And to be able to have some of us representing disability in there, it's really powerful. And come to this book with an open mind and open heart, and allow yourself to learn and grow through the process of learning from each phenomenal person included.
for those individuals that are disabled, they don't often think that writing something can be an impact or that they are capable of doing it. I know for me personally, having dyslexia, I've always often been told earlier on, why would you want to write that? You have a hard time reading. It's okay for me to be able to still do certain things now, and I need some time to read some things, and I don't always see the letters the way others see. So there are moments my superpowers kick in and I get a different perspective.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the impact that you really want this to make.
Yeah, like I was raised with a disabled sister who had cerebral palsy and epilepsy. And I realized, like, when I was entering into higher education, that I had no idea what the full scope of disability was. There was so much stigma in mental health. But once I came into this beautiful community that allowed me to fully see that there are strengths within disabilities, it really opened up a grace to myself and to my disabilities to learn from them. On disability Twitter, there is this phenomenal hashtag called My Disability Taught Me. And my chronic pain has taught me to listen to my body more, to really rest when I need to. My ADHD is creative, bouncy, and such like that. Like, I don't think the art that I do would be the same without the ADHD changing how I see things. I really love, like, even though I have depression, it makes me more in touch with my emotions, because sometimes we feel like mental health is something else separate, but it really becomes something I get to intentionally do every day. And there are those little lessons from every disability that we live with. And I even see my disabilities as a part of my identity. My disability pronouns are neurodivergent and visibly disabled, dynamically disabled, because sometimes I'll use a cane, sometimes I won't. And just being a disabled woman, because a person with a disability is like woman with cell phone. Oh, crap, I've lost a cell phone. Woman without cell phone. My disabilities are not an accessory. My disabilities are a necessity within my life and a blessing from God.
So hearing that insight, there's a lot of people that have sometimes a issue if they can't physically see your disability, but there are disabilities that are invisible. I know for me, I had to for a long time, and it's mostly because of how I was raised. I'm a native of Washington, D.C., and during the time that I was going to school, if you were labeled with any sort of disability, you were thrown inside of a back room, never to be heard from again, and nobody had strengthened you or empowered you or helped you. And because I think I've never been diagnosed, but I think I have a touch of ADD because I was that little girl. I would get my work done quickly. So there wasn't an issue with my intellect. It was just a matter of keeping my attention long enough to complete a task. And if I got bored, and to this day, it's like squirrel. So
Yeah, squirrel.
I need somebody to capture my attention.
Yeah.
But there are tools and techniques that you can learn to give you the support. Is there something that you think that you can share for individuals that may have an invisible disability and a technique or tool that they can use to help empower them move into their next trajectory?
Ooh, I'm with you so much on disabilities, because like most of my disabilities are invisible, except for when fibromyalgia drives me to need a cane and my sciatica. But invisible disabilities, knowing that you identify with ADHD, ADD, I have the same connections, because I wasn't diagnosed until like 2 years ago with ADHD. And that was about 18 years into 19 years of a higher education journey, struggling. And what I find in disability, the community that's so beautiful, is that self-diagnosis is valid. There are tools like Black Girl Lost Keys. Oh my gosh, her website is this cornucopia of amazing tools and things to really help you in having neurodivergent conditions, ADHD, autism, STEMmy awesome toys, because stimming is okay. Like sometimes there's just things that are fun to hold and play with and fidget with. Just let that inner child live and do what you want. Like if you have a spinny chair and you feel like shaking it a little bit, do it. If you need to spin in the chair to get some energy out, do it. Like we don't have to be constrained by what adulthood should mean. we can be our full selves and really come into community where disability tutor, you can go, hi, my name is Syreeta. I was just diagnosed with ADHD. I don't know what to do and how I can really thrive in my life with this. And so many ADHD coaches, so many other neurodivergent Black people came, and the whole community is just so warm and welcoming. You don't need a formal diagnosis to really start engaging in tools to live more fully in your diagnoses that you feel you have, because health inequities impact our communities so much that the diagnosis is always going to be far off in the wilderness from us experiencing symptoms. So go with what you need to do now for yourself and find the community to accept you.
I'm glad that you shared that, because I know for me personally, yes, there was a test that was done, but that was fourth grade. I have gone years without seeing that paper, knowing what was on it, or having someone give that statement to those around me. So one of the things, like you were stating, we have to do is be clear about what our needs are and ask for help. When my grandmother told me, now, because it was such a stigma back in the 80s, I did not let people know that I had difficulties. So my grandmother worked with me as much as I could, but she did find resources and a place. So I ended up switching elementary schools to a school where I had a support system. Miss Anderson, I don't know what Miss Anderson's official title was, but Miss Anderson was my support system from fourth grade through my senior year. I would go to class in the morning, sort of like get all of my classwork from my homeroom teacher. And then I'd spend the day with Miss Anderson, where she taught me skills on how to segment the letters so I can read them. And that supported me, because now I have an electrical engineering degree, which was difficult to walk through getting, but I got it. But there were tools that I used that she gave me, and I started helping others around me. And with the pandemic, COVID revealed some things in a lot of ways. I realized, because I had always asked for what I needed, when we were put in a position where we were working from home, I no longer had my tools. And I had to tell my job, I need support. And they're looking at me like, what support do you need? Because I'm highly qualified, highly intelligent, with the skill set that I have as a technical engineer in the environment that I work in. And because I asked for what I needed, they just provided it. No one paid attention to, and neither did I, because it has been over 30 some odd years, y'all. I've been living and working through the process naturally, asking for that help, then realizing that you need to have an actual diagnosis written somewhere to get the support that you were already given when you asked. That can be expensive. I didn't realize how much it costs to diagnose me with dyslexia, on top of the fact that it's typically a childhood diagnosis. When you're an adult, they don't know how to do that. They had to go to Children's Hospital to find a physician. Yes. To actually write the diagnosis down that I already knew existed. But because my job knew that they needed me to work with that, they were great with the reasonable accommodations until the paperwork came through. What would you say to help others that may not have the resources to pay for those tests? Because that was a couple of $1,000s. I'm thankful that I have insurance. But what would you say for those that aren't able to pay for those tests, to go through that, and how to truly be empowered to speak up and share what they need?
Yeah, I think starting that conversation is one of the most difficult things. Like, I wrote a paper for the Association of Women in Science on science advocacy and accessibility, because it really does seem like disabilities and like intelligence, somehow they're divided. It's like, oh, can you really be a scientist and disabled? It's like, no, true, you can. That's what disabled in STEM really says. But there is such a divide between those who have the access to diagnosis, getting that diagnosis and easily being able to use that paperwork to get the accommodations, versus those who are self-diagnosed, who know they've lived with this for years. And it all comes down to having supervisors that are willing to listen, not listen to just like respond, but listen to understand, and how they can support you in continuing to bring your best into the workplace, to make them understand why you need this, and also the ADA, it is your right to have the accommodations you need for your disabilities. So it is incredibly critical that we take advantage of the rights that we have as disabled people in this country, and we don't allow anything to hold us back from saying it. And something really important that I think also holds a lot of us back is internalized ableism. Like, we know racism is the discrimination based on the color of our skin, but we don't talk about ableism as much, the discrimination based on a diagnosis that we have, the disabilities that we have with us. And within our community, internalized ableism is something that is so strong. That stigma that says, I shouldn't say this, I shouldn't say something's wrong. If I say something wrong, I have to work, I'm already working twice as hard because I'm Black, twice as hard because I'm a woman, 10 times as hard because I'm disabled. But the Black feminist disability framework really frames so much how Blackness is seen as strength and disability has been characterized as weakness because we don't talk about it.
Let's dig a little deeper with that, because we often have that space where what you said, the Black woman has to always be the strong one. And because society feels that we carry the burdens that we aren't really human, it seems. They think that they can just say whatever they want to say, operate whatever they want to operate. But if there's something that is done by a Black person in the same context, it's a cardinal sin and you're thrown under the bus. And it is also a representation of every other Black person in existence. I realize that there's, because of the United States and how this country is founded on the Blacks of Black people, and you had to dehumanize an entire group of individuals so that those people that were building the country can feel good about themselves. But now we're in a place where we got to transition. We now have our first Black president, and my husband brought this to my attention. We have our first Black vice president, a woman, and now our first Black Supreme Court justice, a woman. With this now being our new platform, I am praying and hoping that we can start changing the narrative to get into a better position so that we can be seen outside of other things. And then we can go through what you were talking about, a discussion about the hidden disabilities with the mental disorders, because unfortunately, George Floyd and so many others were killed when there was a mental disability. I saw on Twitter, because you are the Twitter queen. On Twitter, I saw a video of an officer that actually took the time for a young man who had autism to speak to him. And he got away from his mother from home and he was wandering the streets, but he got lost. And so he was triggered. In his triggering, he seemed combative because this was a teenage boy. He was 17, but he was 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds, and he looked aggressive when he was just trying to figure out how to deal with the association. You shared with me that there is something called Autism Acceptance Month. Can you tell us when that is, what it's really about, and how people can celebrate and gain more insight?
Of course, I'd be glad to. So Autism Acceptance Month is celebrated all in March as well. And March 2nd, I believe, is a day when we have World Autism Acceptance Day. It's usually seen as awareness, but there's a big difference between awareness and acceptance. So awareness, like I'm aware that we're both black on this call, like I'm aware, like, but the accepting it is like welcoming in the belonging community and really enveloping that person within society. Because living as an autistic person really is to live on the fringes, where autism is seen as a childhood condition. Children grow up. Autism is not a condition that leads to death at 18. And we dream beyond 18 of our careers, what we wish to do, and autistic adults need to be heard. And really, this month, for Autism Acceptance Month, consider where you're donating for autism, and consider not supporting Autism Speaks, because it's actually known within the autism community as a hate group. And Autism Self-Advocacy Network and a lot of other associations are actually driven by autistic people, not the autistic moms who are speaking more in place of this is a deficit, how hard we work, but we need to hold space for autistic adults to speak their truth, even those who are non-speaking and use AAC devices, which is basically a communication device where they like basically the computer speaks for them. So they all matter. There's not higher or lower functioning. It's just our environments need to be willing to support autistic people and to allow us to thrive and not to like be pushed aside. I also self-identify as autistic.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I know I am not aware enough. I haven't been in an environment where I've had to be really exposed or take the time to truly gauge some of that insight. But here's the thing that I know to be true. For those individuals that have that experience, being the advocate and being the one that speaks out is the resource that we need, because you're there with more insight. I speak on the various things that I'm aware of, being a dyslexic nerd, bringing awareness to the fact that there are Black engineers, Black scientists in an environment. And because I'm also in a corporate sector, I've had to take that fight into a different direction. And with you being in this element, you are also available as a public speaker and a consultant to open perspectives from disability as a liability to disability as capability and a hidden strength. How can people contact you for that?
So you can contact me on Twitter. My handle is at Nolan_Syreeta. You can contact me at LinkedIn. My name is Syreeta Nolan. You can also contact me on Facebook, same name. And you can contact me by email at snolan.j, justice, advocacy, and disability education, that's because Jade stands for, at gmail.com. So I look forward to hearing from you, and let's transform the narrative from disability as a liability to disability as a hidden strength that we can foster in your communities.
Thank you so much for that, Syreeta. And I want to thank you for the strength that you are bringing. Can you give our audience one strategy or something that they can take away from this moment? We've had such a rich discussion, but what is one last comment, question, or thought that you would like to give them along the way that they can use?
So if you are living with any disability, a physical disability, a mental health disability, you don't have to go through it alone. It is not something you need to be ashamed of. You can first bring acceptance and grace to yourself, and then find community that you can live in that grace and acceptance with as well. Because being Black and disabled is very hard in today's society. You shouldn't have to go through this alone, and you're not alone.
Well, thank you so much, Syreeta. I'm so glad that you have shared this information with us. And so, for those of you that are looking for some insight through the process, reach out to Syreeta. You can contact her on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Have her have a conversation. If you're looking to get more insight, she is the one that you can contact for that. So thank you for this. Truly appreciate it. And for those of you that are on Clubhouse, I encourage you to join me every Tuesday in the Red Alert Diaries room at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so that we can continue this discussion, or we can start a new one. In the meantime, this is Tanya E. Hood, walking in my purpose, and I want you to do the same.